So I would like to introduce Mari Thorman and Sean Tolram. Sean is a new friend who I understand is the global program manager for the mindfulness team in HSBC. Also, I do know is an active member of the Mindful Workplace community, and we see you often in these sessions, so that's terrific. So we're delighted to have you with us. Mari, I'm not going to say you're an old friend because that would be rude, but you're a friend who I have known for longer, and we have been together on partly this Mindful Workplace community journey, and I've been watching and admiring your work in HSBC for a long time. And you also very kindly hosted the Mindful Workplace community in the HSBC buildings for our launch, what seems like about 100 years ago, but it's only about 2, maybe less. But yes, in the days before, when we had meetings in person. So we owe you a great deal in that journey. And we really wanted to bring you along to talk about really one of the core themes for the Mindful Workplace community. So obviously, the Mindful Workplace community came together to really share best practice on how do you implement mindfulness in the workplace, and to provide support and inspiration for those of us who can feel very isolated when we're trying to champion that cause in a world which may not get it, may have lots of misconceptions about what it is, and may sometimes feel quite unfriendly towards it. And that's certainly how Mari and my friendship sort of struck up, being in that sort of situation. So that's why that was sort of our core mission, if you like, at the heart of everything. And so when we started with the Mindful Workplace community, we did have a number of talks from people who had mindful networks and mindful programs within the workplace. And so it's great to hear the latest from HSBC, one of the, I think it's fair to say, more advanced sort of global organizations in this space with a very well-established mindful network. But I'm going to really ask you a question, I think, and I will leave it to you who's going to answer it first. And just to reassure everybody, it's not just I'm not going to completely hog the limelight. I am going to, because that's what I do. Sorry about that. But after about 20-25 minutes, we're going to open up questions to the floor. So please feel free to sort of store up those questions, and then we'll open up and have plenty of time for Q&A at about past or just after that. So the first question really, and I suppose I had Mari in mind with this, but it'd be great to hear both of your takes on it. Really about your journey, the HSBC journey, and also your personal journeys, about where the HSBC program came from and how you've got to where you are now. And for those who aren't familiar with the HSBC program, maybe a little bit about what that means. What is the HSBC program now? Who wants to go first?
Or Mari.
No, I was tempted just to be slightly mischievous to put it on to Sean, but no, I'll take it.
I bet you would, yeah.
I'm very intrigued to see what Sean sort of says as well. And can I just say, we do have quite a lot, which is lovely to see, of our network champions on the call as well. So guys, do feel free to challenge anything I say if you disagree, or if it's not resonating with your experience of the programme. And hopefully during the question and answers, I'm sure you guys will be able to chip in as well. So to keep it brief, because I must admit, Andrew, and Teresa, it's wonderful to be invited back, but I do wonder sometimes, you know, I feel like I've told this story a number of times over the years, because it's about a 10-year story in the making. So I guess for me, sometimes I wonder if people are a little bit bored about it. So apologies if you've heard some of this before. But I probably will be maybe repeating some of the things I've said, but hopefully adding some new learnings in from my perspective, certainly about the resilience element of keeping this going in challenging times, but actually very opportunistic times as well, which you know, certainly we found during the pandemic. So I guess to keep it a very brief overview, Andrew, would it be useful for me to share the slide maybe, and I can, you know, talk to that?
Yeah. I think that'd be a great idea.
Yeah, Teresa, is that okay? Am I allowed to share? Shall I try and share it? Let's have a go. So I just pulled this together just to try and make sure I don't forget anything. If somebody can kindly stick their thumb up if you can see what I'm sharing, that would be great. Brilliant, thank you. All right, so as you can see, and Andrew did comment on this as we were just sort of chatting before we brought everybody in. So one of the things that we managed to do this last year, which is new, is brand ourselves. So HSBC, for those of you that don't know HSBC, has this very nice and I think very effective kind of play on the brand, where they do this kind of inversion of the hexagon against various images. So we were very fortunate to be given the opportunity this year, as part of being much more formally supported as a programme, to start putting some of these together for us as a network as well. So we can perhaps come on to that in a bit, but this is one of the ones, and I think it's fair to say this is probably one of the favourite ones that most people tend to like and resonate with. We've had lots of people start to use it as their backgrounds as well, so that's been really lovely to see. But just to start off then, so the very brief history, for those of you that don't know, my actual full-time proper job at HSBC is I'm an IT architect. I started there 20 odd years ago. In fact, I just celebrated my 20-year anniversary in April this year, which in many ways feels like it's gone very quickly, in other ways feels like it's a lifetime ago. Prior to becoming an IT sort of architect, though, I was actually, my original career was in psychology. So my graduate and postgraduate degrees were in psychology, and quite a bit of my initial work experience was as a researcher and then as an assistant psychologist. So I guess maybe a little bit of a left field decision to leave that behind and go into finance and IT, but certainly feels to me like it's coming back round now, most definitely through this programme. So what is it at HSBC? Well, we started out as a network. I prefer to use the word community now, if I'm honest, because I think network tends to feel a little bit impersonal, but also doesn't really reflect that thing that we are, which is really a community of people, like-minded, passionate, who've one way or another come through to mindfulness and found it incredibly helpful in our own lives, and are just very passionate about sharing that with our colleagues. And I would say, and I think it's probably fair to say for most of the champions here, you know, in our personal lives as well. So it started out about 10 years ago as a volunteer-led piece. It was something that I started in Sheffield, which is where I'm based with HSBC. It's the tech centre traditionally has been. And it was really out of my own experiences of burning out. So I first discovered meditation as mindfulness in my 20s when I was having panic attacks. Dabbled around, went to various Buddhist sort of groups who were very welcoming. But as soon as I felt better, kind of dropped it really. It was sort of there in the background. So it was only really, you know, about 10 years later when I was in Sheffield and starting to explore this more that I came across the term mindfulness and the work of John Kabat-Zinn and all of the other work that obviously I'm sure most of you will be familiar with. And as a result of me recognising through some of my original mindfulness and meditation training that I was starting to burn out, I kind of really anchored back to it and explored it, and you know, it became for me to cope, to thankfully not completely burn out, and to find ways of dealing with that. And it just occurred to me that actually, wouldn't it be lovely to actually bring this into the workplace more, so that quite selfishly I wouldn't feel odd and strange, and that there would be people that I could relate to about it. I also read a book around that time by I think it's Gail Lindenfeld, The Joy of Burnout, which I found incredibly helpful. But one of the things she suggested in that was the idea of creating a soul community. And I remember at the time that resonating, but thinking, how on earth would you do that? And it didn't really occur to me until only a few years ago that that's probably what's ended up happening. You know, I think this is, for me, a soul community, and not just what we've done at HSBC, but this network, this group here as well, and all of the other wonderful people that are trying to do similar things with it. So it started out very small, me just offering sessions. I'd done some training, our local cathedral sessions on mindfulness. So I started volunteering there. The Buddhist Trust, who co-led that, very kindly trained me and sort of built up my confidence. So I've been doing that for a couple of years, and then decided maybe this would be something that we could offer more formally at HSBC, might encourage more people to come along that maybe were slightly by the cathedral Buddhist kind of label on it. So we did that, and then every time we did anything, it kind of grew. So I was very fortunate to be connected with other people via our internal sort of health and well-being function at that time, and it became very clear that there was lots of other people like me, which was wonderful to find, that were interested, trying to do similar things. And about 4 or 5 of us in different locations came together and decided we would try and create a network and see what we could do to bring this to more people. And that's really where it started. So from those early days, every time we went somewhere really to offer this and do more sessions, we had the very pleasant problem of just being inundated with more demand. So it became quite obvious that we were going to be quite outstripped by demand quite quickly. So in about 2013, that led me to start thinking about, well, what could we do to help train other people at HSBC who perhaps didn't feel as confident or hadn't done some of the MBSR and the MBCT type training outside of the bank to actually feel confident to be what we've now, become known as champions. So we had a number of principles around this, and I was very passionate, and still am, about that this should be inclusive to all. So I didn't want this to be just you can only attend these if you're in Sheffield, or you can only attend these if you happen to work in this business line or in this job discipline. My view was this is an important skill that if people want it, it should be there and available. So that was really part of that model of trying to train internal people. And I'm sure a lot of you on this call, as maybe trainers and providers, will be quite used to going into organisations like HSBC, and we certainly had, a culture of that already. There was lots of people bringing people in, slightly informally, but with local budgets, and we were finding there was mixed results on that. So again, that need to kind of make it safe, to standardise, to kind of understand what is a good, credible model for us to kind of work out who HSBC should be working with, and perhaps those people who perhaps weren't really that authentic and were perhaps just tagging it on to some other elements of coaching and things that they perhaps done but didn't really live and breathe. And I certainly went to a few funded sessions that one of our ERGs put together that really made me feel, gosh, this just feels the antithesis of mindfulness, really. So that's where that safety element came in, and that ability to make sure that we were protecting our employees, but also protecting HSBC as a brand. I think the world has definitely moved on massively in the last 10 years, but when we were just starting out, it was, there's still quite a lot of misconceptions as to what mindfulness is, what it isn't, and certainly quite a number of senior people who were, very, very hesitant about getting involved in it. But I think definitely that world has moved on with all of the good things that everybody here is doing, and obviously apps like Headspace, etc. as well. So it got to the point where we needed to get some sponsorship for this. So we're quite passionate in that, a lot of what has been achieved and the success, I think, of what we've been doing is because of the passion and the volunteers. But that only takes you so far when we start to get sort of, some kind of, barriers and challenges around, what can you do in the workplace when you need to do some more formal training. You obviously need some funding around that. So we were very lucky, and again, I think it was a sign of the times that the mental well-being agenda was starting to become, something that was important, that HSBC, certainly in the UK, were recognising, and the HR teams had already started to commission, work on what the state of the nation was from a UK HSBC point of view. So to some extent, we were pushing on an open door with HR when we went to them with a proposal, but there was some skepticism. We couldn't point at a model where this had been done successfully or continuously. So that's where we started to sort of negotiate and say, well, let's do a pilot. And I should say, in and amongst all of this, because I appreciate I've been talking lots, is that I, as part of trying to explore how we could do this, that's when I started to really look externally. So I put myself through MBSR training to understand that course. I'd kind of experienced that myself, but was wondering, would that apply, that kind of model? So started to link up with the likes of Rebecca Crane, Sharon Hadley at Bangor, started to link up with Michael Chaskelson, who at that time was the only person that I could find that was really doing anything like this in the workplace, and started to attend, you know, some of those conferences, and then met Jamie Bristow, who I'm sure a lot of you will be aware of, you know, and this is where we kind of got linked in very, very happily with the likes of Andrew and others as well, who were involved in the early days, all trying to do the same sort of thing. So it was wonderful again. Not only did we know that there were people internally at HSBC, but there was a whole load of people externally as well. So it was really validating. And that kind of group of people, that soul community, I guess, started to form in those early days. But I think it's fair to say, Andrew, I think you were probably one of the precursors with what you had done. And there wasn't too many people that had the kind of evidential sort of, you know, the sort of experience that you had. So that was definitely very inspirational. But it occurred to me that, you know, for HSBC, I was quite passionate about whatever we did needed to be something that empowered our internal employees, because as much as you can buy in training and you can buy in excellent training, the change will only happen if it's the internal colleagues that embrace it and support it and actually continue to embed it. And that's where the community element comes in. So I feel like I've spoken a lot there. Maybe I'll just call out the other principles that are in the top right-hand corner, because these are, I think, hopefully the cornerstone of some of the success that we've had. So we were very passionate about whatever we did and however we took it forward, that we actually were able to make sure that it was sustainable and realistic and scalable. So obviously HSBC is a multinational corporation. I think our current employee numbers is around the 220,000. So, you know, we're a big company across many markets, obviously different cultures, different languages. So we wanted to make sure that it could realistically scale. I felt that actually the champion model was definitely a way to help with that, because, you know, cost effectiveness wise, it was certainly going to be easier for us to have internal people trained to start that ripple effect than necessarily to buy in all of that external expertise everywhere that we wanted to go. Obviously, we want to make sure it's customer orientated so that what we're doing continues to satisfy the demand. And that's, I think, probably hopefully where Sean will talk a little bit more about that and his observations of maybe how that's transitioned. And we've kept that kind of passion of it has to be inclusive. And this was really before, I think, you know, diversity and inclusion had obviously been, you know, popularized and as a very important concept, and certainly the same as HSBC. But I think that the focus tended to be on the diversity side as opposed to the inclusive side. So I was quite passionate that actually mindfulness was one of those few things that probably went across all of those different diverse groups. And sure enough, when we first launched, it was actually mindfulness that was called out in most of the kind of collaborative kind of events and sessions that we did with our ability network, our balance network, our faith networks, etc., because it was kind of that continuous thing that actually, regardless of kind of what diverse lens you were putting on something, actually the mindfulness was a fairly continual piece across those. Safety I've already covered, and then the other key elements that maybe have helped us, I think, is this impactful. So I was very keen that we were research driven and research led, so that whilst there wasn't a huge amount, certainly nothing really published when we started around mindfulness in the workplace. Obviously, there's a huge and growing amount in the clinical world around MBSR and MBCT and the success of that. I wanted to try and make sure that we would at least try and follow as much of that research as we could, but also contribute back. So as much as we can, the things that we do, we try and put the data around that as well. And the final thing, and this is a more recent thing really, and I think we'll come on to this in a bit, was this sense of coherency. So trying to make sure that what we do at HSBC around mindfulness, you know, makes sense to people, that they can understand, they can contextualize it, that it kind of lands with other things that are going on. And I think certainly my experience with the pandemic is it's been hugely satisfying to see just how many areas now are focusing on well-being. You know, I don't think we've talked about it so much, quite honestly. So that's wonderful, but I think we're also slightly, you know, suffering from slight good intention overload. You know, we've now got so much information and so much well-being happening all across the group that it's quite difficult for people who are already busy, quite pressured, potentially struggling with their own well-being, to actually pick out what's important for them and how to, you know, what they can actually sort of maybe pick out that's actually going to be useful to them or their team. So that coherency, I think, has become far more important recently, and something that we're trying to work on. So, Sean, that's my answer. Beat that one if you can.
Is there anything left, Sean? Is there anything that... You're on mute.
You're on mute, Sean.
Now, how about now? Can you hear me?
Yeah. I'll put some more of the circle up, just so in case there's anything there that you want to talk to.
So as usual, Mary has covered all of the important points. So thank you, Mary. I can tell you a bit about my journey and how I got involved in mindfulness. So it's a slightly different journey to Mary. I've been in digital teams for the past 20 years. And as my career progressed, I found myself being responsible for larger teams of people. And I started to think about how to build high-performing teams, how to get the most out of people, how to help people to achieve the things that they wanted to. And at the time, there was very much a command and control approach, where if people weren't performing at a certain level, then they would almost be threatened by their end-of-year reviews and their bonuses and all of these things. And I started to think there must be a better way to encourage high levels of performance. And I discovered mindfulness because I found myself talking a lot about focus and awareness, and being able to manage your emotions, being aware of your mental state, how tired you are, how fatigued you are. And I didn't know at the time, but I was doing mindfulness with these teams. And I started to get more involved in servant leadership and agile working. And again, there are many parallels to mindfulness. And eventually, I did put it all together, and I realized that actually I was encouraging my teams to do mindfulness. So I very much got involved because I was looking for a way to achieve peak performance. In a similar way to how elite athletes, LeBron James, Raheem Sterling, you know, we've seen them in the press talking about mindfulness. So that's my area of interest. And I started to do experiments on the teams that I was managing, and introducing mindful ways of working and then measuring the impact that it had on those teams. And I was able to show that by encouraging mindful or healthier ways of working, we were able to produce better levels of performance. We were able to reduce error rates. We were able to produce higher scores in motivation surveys and lots of different things. So I found that by introducing mindfulness, as my career progressed, it's helped me to encourage performance in teams that I've managed and the teams around me. And that's really the area that I'm really interested in. It's how mindfulness can help us to make the most of our amazing brains, how it can help us to be more innovative, more creative, and how it can, you know, help us to deliver the results that we want to deliver. But it's not just about delivering, it's about doing it in a healthy way. So while doing all this amazing work, also being aware of our work-life balance and being able to spend the right amount of time with our families and friends, getting the right amount of sleep. So seeing it all as one big holistic package where, you know, we're just trying to live healthier lives and be the best that we can be. I think I helped save a marriage once, because there was a guy in my team who was checking his emails while he was on the dinner table with his wife and his kids, and his wife was not happy about it. She even came in and I spoke to her. She complained about it. So we started exploring different ways of working, where he could be more aware of what's important, what are the priorities, and also aware of when it's the right time to stop and have a break and refresh your brain so that you can come back and be more productive later on. He implemented a lot of these techniques. And his wife, at least, I don't know about here, his wife is much happier. He's spending more time with his kids, and yeah, they're doing really well. And he's also performing really well at work. So it's stories like that that really give me the motivation to continue doing this kind of work. So I took a sabbatical a year ago because I just wanted a break and I wanted to reassess my career after working in digital teams for 20 years. And around the same time, Mary had received funding to recruit people into her team. So that was how I joined Mary in her team. And I'm now really interested in how we can take the mindfulness products and services that we're developing and scale them globally, but in a cost-effective way, so that we can have a much bigger impact across the organization. And when I talk to other companies, you know, they often think, well, it's HSBC, you just throw loads of money at it. It's easy. If we had all that money, we'd be doing this. But actually, when it started, when Mary started, you started it with nothing, didn't you, Mary? And even now, the things that we're doing, we're not pumping huge amounts of money into it because we don't have it. A lot of the things we're doing are costing nothing. So that's something going into next year that I'm really interested in, how we can scale globally, have a massive impact across the organization, but do it in a cost-effective way that can be replicated in other organizations. So we can go out, we can tell our story, we can help other teams, other companies to do similar things. So I tried to match how long Mary took. I probably didn't manage to do it. Is that all right, Andrew?
It's very, very good. Now, I'm conscious that because time is tight, I'm going to be lynched at the next time that we meet each other if I don't create some space for questions. But I do want to ask, if I can ask maybe just a brief word, perhaps Sean first and then Mari, on what do you think is the biggest challenge that you face now in terms of your program? What do we, you know, we're coming out of the pandemic, all being well, certainly in the UK, but there are different challenges globally. You might be affected by that. It might be something which is unrelated to the pandemic. But what for you, Sean, is the biggest challenge faced by the HSBC mindfulness program at the moment?
So for me, I think with HSBC being so massive, there's a lot of initiatives at the moment. There's many different teams who are doing different things, and it can be very confusing for the employees to know which direction to go in and what's the best thing for them. And with HSBC, it's almost like having hundreds of different companies under one umbrella. We're not as joined up as you might think. So probably the big challenge for us is to be able to combine our efforts across the organization in a joined up and coherent way that gives our employees the best possible outcome, which can be a challenge because, you know, everyone's got their own objectives, and it's not always easy. So that's something that I'll be very interested to look at next year.
Thank you, Sean. And what about you, Mari? What do you think is your biggest challenge?
Yeah, I was contemplating this the other day, Andrew. And I think for me, there's two. You know, notwithstanding what Sean said, that coherency thing is definitely something that, you know, we need to try and address. But I think that's a cross HSBC issue, actually, not just unique to the mindfulness program. So I think for us, what we've been doing this year is a lot of what we've been calling global test and learn. So the funding that Sean mentioned. So we've been sponsored now formally as a program since I would say 2019 in terms of, you know, I've been formally seconded to work on this full time, which is an amazing privilege. But I think, and what we realised as we started to do that, running into obviously the first phase of the pandemic in the UK, at least in early 2020, is, you know, that's where, regardless of what we intended to do, our demand just went through the roof. Which, you know, it was satisfying in the sense that we were there, we could respond, but obviously you wouldn't ever wish that set of circumstances to create it. But what it did do is, I think it kind of broke that ceiling with senior execs. So whereas we've kind of had support from senior execs, but not really had people engaging themselves personally, sharing their own stories, and really, you know, that has definitely changed. And I now feel that we've got, not everybody, but certainly a good pocket of senior execs, including John Hinshaw, who, you know, has you know, come in as our global COO now and started to formally sponsor us last summer. to continue this year to roll this out globally. So the challenge for me is we are starting to test and learn with this great sponsorship into the countries where we think that there's demand. We've had, you know, in this virtual world, it's been great that we've been able to have people from all over join, even though we weren't necessarily targeting, you know, different countries. And certainly some of our champions that are on this call today are you know, good examples of that. So it's been wonderful. But what we wanted to do is, well, how can we help? You know, what started 10 years ago in the UK, but it's been a slow burn really, you know, and taken time. How can we try and help accelerate that to understand the demand, and then how we can help satisfy it in those other countries? So for me, it's that penetration. So we have, you know, a good set of core products, as Sean says. We have, you know, kind of the equivalent of the 8-week course, but more tailored to the workplace. We have the champion training program. We have the ability for those champions to offer, you know, guided practice sessions, to offer tasters, and all of these great things that they're doing. We also now have Headspace that's been offered across the group as well. So there's a great array, and yet even now I would guess that our penetration in terms of what people know, I suspect is, I'm guessing, but I would imagine is around, you know, sort of 10, 15, certainly no more than 20%. So it's, how do we get this out to people, even in the UK, where, you know, I would say, gosh, if you don't know about us by now, you know, where have you been? You know, we still have people saying, I didn't know you existed. These courses are great. So you know, so it's that, it kind of comes in with that coherency, you know, but it's how do we make sure that people, it's that classic phrase of, you know, if we build it, they'll come. But you know, the niggly feeling I have is we've kind of got it, but I'm not sure everybody knows about it. So how do we fix that? Yeah.
Brilliant. So that's interesting. Different takes, different challenges. It shows that just after all of this work, all of this investment, all of this passion, it's still not an easy road. There's still challenges to overcome. So one last question from me, and then feel free to either put questions into the chat. If you can direct them towards Teresa, that would be great, and then Teresa can curate them, or we can put hands up and then I'll call people in. But one last question from me to Mari, if I may. Forgive me, Sean, but as the sort of founder of this network, what would you say is the thing that you're most proud of, most personally proud of? Because I have to say, one of the things which I know, and it's very, you know, as you said, you know, I like many people on the call have been involved in trying to champion mindfulness in the workplace, and it can be a lonely and challenging thing to do. And to see what you've achieved, Mari, over this time, and the persistence, the courage and the passion that you put into it, it's a real testament to what you've achieved. So, you know, I just wanted to say that and name that. But along that path, you know, you've obviously affected a lot of people and had an impact on a lot of people and brought this to a lot of people. So I'm just really intrigued to say, what's the thing that you're most proud of? What do you think? Yeah, that was all right.
It's going to sound like a woefully rehearsed answer, this, but especially that we do have so many of our champions on here, which is wonderful. But it is the proudest thing for me is that, you know, and I do tend to, because, you know, I founded this and I've been with it so long, you know, I am conscious that it tends to be me that, you know, figureheading it a lot, but you know, and it's a cliche, but we certainly wouldn't be here doing what we're doing without all of the people who are on this call right now, you know, who are doing the champion work, you know, bringing their passion, you know, I hope finding a similar satisfaction that I did when I first started around, you know, just helping people, and that really amazing buzz of just connecting with your colleagues and people at home, you know, and in your personal lives. So that's what I'm most proud of, is that, you know, that we're still here actually, and so everybody's, you know, it hasn't always been easy, and sometimes you do doubt yourself and wonder, gosh, is this the right model? Are we doing the right thing? But every time that happens, and Sean can certainly testify to, you know, I definitely have roller coaster rides in terms of confidence and what we're doing, and should we change direction. You know, it is just going back to, and we have this lovely SharePoint where we ask people to write testimonials and give feedback on the, you know, the champion activities that they've received. And it's just, heartwarming and overwhelming, you know, to see that, because that's the, you know, those are the real voices of the people that are directly, you know, finding this as beneficial. And, you know, if I may, you know, we just literally had our programme steering committee yesterday, so I pulled some of these together. So if I may, I'm just going to read a couple out because I find them absolutely heartwarming. So here's one. Simply brilliant. The champion was a big hit. Several have said they were moved to tears. Thank you. The mindfulness community and being involved in it in the last few years is the highlight of my time at HSBC. I think these pauses are an amazing idea, and ideally would be great for everyone to be able to take just a small pause each day for themselves. The great thing about the pause is it's so quick, it doesn't take a huge part of your day, but the benefits are amazing. This was a great session highlighting issues that I have experienced personally, historically, around holding on to negatives, etc. And it gave me food for thought. It was content that I hadn't seen or heard before. It was delivered in a professional manner as well. And then the final one I'll read out. I'm sure you're not doing this for appreciation, but I just wanted to let you know that you cannot imagine the extent of support and positive impact it has on us and our families and all the people we interact with. Feel really blessed and grateful for this initiative and support by the bank. It personally helped me a lot during the peak of COVID to stay grounded. I am sure it helped others too. So that's what I'm proud of, you know, and that's gets me emotional. This is what everybody, you know, who's come on board with this has helped to achieve. Yeah.
Wonderful, wonderful.
I'm glad Andrew didn't ask me, because that was literally my answer.
Well, there you go. We synced up on that one.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Well, thank you both. Thank you so much. So we have got some questions. So I hope you are ready for some questions, and please feel free to raise a hand as well, and we'll get through as many questions as we can. So first question, well, two questions actually from Susan Keane, I think it is. I don't know if you want to actually ask your question yourself, or shall I ask it for you? I'm happy to ask it for you.
I'm happy, Andrew, you to ask. Thank you.
Okay, that's absolutely great. Thank you. So two great questions. Firstly, wondering if the in-house courses, particularly the 8-week training, is accredited by an independent body to adhere to MBSR standards.
So I'll take that one. And Andrew, you know the answer to this one already. So I've been talking to you about this. So the short answer for Susan is no, but it's something that we're looking to pursue. So we are trying to work out how we best accredit it. So some people have talked around, you know, pursuing ICF, so coaching sort of accreditation. BAMBA, which obviously Andrew's involved in as well, is definitely one that I would like to see what we can do to try and get that kind of rubber stamping and that real backing for what we're doing. What I'd also like to do, and I just don't know where this would be, is have this more internationally recognised, though, because you know, obviously we are an international company, and the training is going across multiple countries. So although I think the UK, alongside obviously the great work in the US, is at the forefront of a lot of this, I think it would be good to have something a bit more international to try and help with that as well.
Thank you. And in case it's helpful, Susan, BAMBA are very much looking at how they can support organisations looking to accredit their corporate offer.
Okay, thank you.
And if I can, I'll go to a question from Alex, and then I'll come back to your question, Susan, because we've got a couple of others, and I don't want to share the love. So from Alex, what have you done with regard to risk for those leading meditations? Alex Reynolds. Sorry, Alex, didn't ask if you want to ask the question. Very rude.
No, I'm that's fine. Thank you very much, Andrew. You do it so eloquently anyway, but yeah, that's exactly what I was asking.
Thanks. So yeah, great question around risk.
Does anybody, Sean, either you know, if you, I'm sure you could answer this very eloquently, but I wonder if any of the other champions would like to answer this if they're feeling brave.
I'll come on if you don't mind.
I was looking directly at you, Mr. Higgins. I was hoping you would chip in. Yeah.
Well, I suppose, Alex, the way that we have been trained, you know, and the kind of sessions that we can carry out, we're always instructed to be very, very careful. We don't tread into areas that we are not equipped to deal with, and that's made very, very firm in every element of your training. And I've been there since the start. So when we're discussing things with mentor the new individuals coming in. We have a buddy system, and they do practices with us before they go out into the open world. And in that respect, we're ensuring that they're not treading over the line where they're maybe, I'm being silly now, but they may be giving people chance to make them levitate or something like that, you know. But it's that kind of thing. We did have some people bringing a yoga element into some of their sessions and things, and it was all made from that. You can't be doing this. This is our line, and this is what you have to stick to. I hope that answers it for you.
Well, that helps. Thanks very much. Thanks, Stephen.
Thank you both. So here's another great question from our friend Tessa. Tessa, do you want to ask the question?
Yeah, why not? Thank you very much, Sean and Mari. That's great. I'm interested to hear about the uptake that you've had with Headspace and how that's landed. And is there subsequently pressure to reduce the live sessions?
I'm going to let Sean answer that, because Sean's had a lot of experience with this, as has Callum, who's also on the call. So yeah, Callum, feel free to chip in if you want to. Yeah.
All right, Tessa, thank you so much for your question. So yeah, Headspace, the take up at the moment, a few months after launch, we're looking at about 20,000 registrations out of 230,000 employees. And there's ongoing, comms and campaigns going out to encourage further registrations. What I've seen in previous teams where we've rolled out Headspace is that you can have a high initial uptake, but over time, the actual usage of the tool can decrease. If people don't have that encouragement, they don't have that support in how to get the most out of the tool. So from my perspective, I see the tool as something that complements the work that we do rather than replacing some of what we do, because we'll be able to show people how to get the most out of it, but also provide tailored personal mindfulness sessions to help people or teams achieve what they want to, using Headspace as a supporting tool. So yeah, that's kind of the way I see it developing as time goes on.
That's great, thank you.
Thanks, Tessa.
Callum, do you have a view on that? Do you want to share?
I think Sean's covered it perfectly. We piloted Headspace with a smaller cohort before it went global, and demand for that ebbs and flows, and the uptake is very explosive, and everyone is jumping onto the app and downloading and doing sessions, and then they kind of fall out with it, not because of any reason other than life gets in the way and you just forget about the app on your phone, much like, I don't know what apps people download on their phones today, but I have loads of apps on my phone that I've downloaded. I thought, that's a good idea, I'll do that, and I've never opened it since. So it does ebb and flow, and we found with our pilot groups, and even with my own practice, I find this as well, Headspace is a useful complementary tool, but having those actual in-person or virtual sessions with people that are more focused, more tailored, more HSBC specific sometimes as well is really, really powerful as well. So it's definitely a complementary tool, and I think the campaigns and the messaging that's going out within the bank around signing up for Headspace recognizes that as well, and is pointing people towards the community as well, which is great.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for clarifying that, because I think as well as you perceiving it as being complementary, it's great to hear that the organizational culture, if you like, is recognizing the value of both and that they are complementary, and that sounds like a very healthy partnership rather than suggesting there's a more cost-effective option, for example.
Yeah, and it's one of the things that we want to do some research around as well. So we've got pretty good evidence around the impact of our courses with pre and post surveys. We'd like to extend that out to to Headspace and other apps, but also Sean is quite rightly very passionate about how can we build out that self-serve part of the offerings, because there is a big demographic in the bank that don't have the time or the desire to do a 6-week course. or they're shift workers, or they work in branches. They haven't got that same flexibility with their time. So there's a lot there that we'd like to explore, because apps is the obvious answer, but I suspect there's quite a number of elements to that equation. So.
Thank you. So going back to Susan's second question, so what training do the champions do?
Is that what do they receive, or what do they give to other people? Sorry,
both.
Susan.
Go for both.
Yeah.
Both.
Well, yeah, but initially I was just their training in terms of their role within the organisation and the work they are doing with mindfulness. So what training that they receive.
What they receive.
Yeah.
Yeah. So so I'll pick up that first part, Sean, if that's okay, but I'm sure you can answer the second part on about what the champions then go on to do. So it's a multi-level training at the moment, Susan, but to be quite candid and frank, we are piloting this, so that, you know, it isn't something that was kind of off the shelf that we've just been able to adapt. So we have different levels. The first level, originally we had people as promoters, so people who were maybe passionate, but maybe had just been introduced, didn't necessarily have an established practice themselves, but were very keen to share this and help us. So we call them promoters. But the kind of first official level of champion is now what we call facilitators, and these are people who can facilitate a guided practice for people, or a taster for teams, which tends to be increasingly what we get asked to do. So, you know, as Headspace gets rolled out and this penetration is starting to be helped by that, you know, we tend to then get asked the secondary question: can somebody come to my team and kind of do a bit of an overview and a taster? And and we have various flavors of those that we call mindful bites. So the training that consists for becoming a facilitator is the prerequisite. You have to have done the 6-week course, so we call that our foundation course, much like you would be doing this in the MBSR world. And then we have, originally it was 4-day training in person, which worked pretty well, but we've had to adapt that, obviously, given COVID. So we adapted that last September to be two parts. So we have one part that is all around mastering how to guide a practice, very simple breathing practice. And that's now run over 2 sessions virtually in cohorts of around 24. And we have 4 trainers facilitating that into breakout groups, etc., to give people the practice in doing it. And the second part of that we call delivery mastery, and that one we're still adapting, to be honest, but that's kind of really giving people the skills and the confidence to be able to deliver a more formal presentation. So it really depends on the person and their background, you know, what their day job is, to how confident they feel in either of those. So it will vary. But that second part is really based on some internal kind of training that the bank, you know, commissioned quite a few years ago around how to do internal, they call them leaders as teachers. So it's kind of around those principles. The next level up we call leader champions, and really we were desperately wanting to run that again this year. We piloted it in January at the beginning of lockdown in 2020, and those champions, there's only about 8 of us, went on to actually run and deliver the 6-week courses ourselves. So it was all a bit of an experiment. It's worked incredibly well. The champions that do this and do it regularly are getting the same, if not better, scores in terms of quality as the external trainers. It's definitely something that the bank are very interested in seeing how they can help us formalise that and make it sustainable in terms of, you know, giving protected time to be able to do this, etc. It's a lot more cost effective as well. Yeah, enables us to be more flexible. So that's an element we'd like to do. The training for that was quite intensive, 4 days, and doing that virtually, I've kind of resisted, but I think we're going to have to, you know, make the decision to do that, because pandemic isn't going to allow global travel anytime soon, we don't think.
Yeah,
so, yeah.
Very interesting. Thank you.
Isn't that fascinating, the results from the internal champions? I think that's really, really interesting. Yeah. One more question. I think we have time for one more question. So forgive me if I'm mispronouncing your name. Is it Annetta? Hi, would you like to ask your question, or would you like me to ask it for you?
Sorry, now it's okay?
Yep, go for it. Go for it.
Yes, my question to Mary is, From the time perspective, what will be your advice on particular stage, talking to executives, searching for the internal sponsor, one or two, searching globally or just in the one country?
Gosh, advice on this. And do you mean, when you say time, do you mean how much time it will take, or it took for us to get to where we are?
I think I said from the time perspective, like you probably had this conversations with executives, with, I don't know, maybe HRs, or I'm working for the global corporate, so I'm just at the beginning.
Oh, well,
so yeah.
Yeah, more than happy to help in any way we can with that, Anita, because I would say from my perspective, I find that the hardest part really, and initially, you know, we got very far without needing too much exec support because, you know, of the passion, but it's, you know, certainly got to a point where we needed it. So I made it a kind of target for me, you know, going out of my comfort zone of trying to contact every COO, CEO, CIO in the UK that I could, you know, since when we started, just to kind of let them know what we were doing, get their thoughts. And initially, I would say the first 3 or 4 years, it was always positive. There was always support in terms of, yes, this sounds great, happy for you to carry on. Some of them even had, you know, their personal practice, or had certainly been introduced to the concepts, you know, via coaching, etc. But nobody was really that keen to actually put their own story out there or kind of publicly back it. So what we then did, 1 second, it's just been told my laptop's battery's low, so if I disappear, apologies. So we then you know, took it to HR in the UK, and that's really what helped us with the initial funding for the pilots. And then I think it was just a happy accident of various people coming together at the right time. But we've had, you know, mixed reports, and I think it is a personal thing, to be honest. I think, you know, the C-suite, we have massively passionate advocates for it. We have some healthy skeptics, and I suspect we have some people who are really not that sure about it at all. And that you know, that's their right. So I think there's an element of luck of getting the right person at the right time, to be honest. But yeah, very, very happy to support you in that, because I think that is one of the hardest things that we've done, and there's definitely an element of luck in it, I would suggest.
Yes, thank you. I might contact. Yes,
yeah,
thank you.
I mean, I should say the other thing that probably helps as well, and is, although there is an element of luck of hitting the right person at the right time, I think because we came with a compelling story and there was already a good groundswell of passionate people doing it, and we were getting good results, we had data, that definitely helped as well. So, you know, we could continuously quote that the courses are helping, you know, show a 30% reduction in stress, you know, for example. Things like that really resonate, so that the data definitely has helped with that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for those brilliant questions, and thank you, Mari and Sean. Thank you so much for coming along and sharing with us. We have run out of time. That was a very quick hour, I have to say, but thank you. Apologies that I wasn't able to get to every question. Thank you so much for coming along and joining us to this evening's session, and may I just wish you all a fantastic weekend, and I hope you have a lovely, restful and mindful time.